So feeding the cities, this is some of the projects that I'd like to share with you about the way that, that we need to work. One of the first things that I see as a core priority is actually protecting and restoring some of the urban agriculture zones, some of the farms and market gardens, production farms that we have. Sung told me, I put that on the bottom there, Sung told me that there's 4,000 hectares of fallow agricultural land in Hong Kong. An enormous potential for actually beginning there to feed maybe millions, 2 million people. If you think about it, it takes, say, 10 to 15 square metres or so to feed a person with their vegetables, and then you divide that between that, you end up with about 2.6 million people who could be fed from those agricultural. That's just a straight plot. If you start to do more intensive production and layered production, you may actually increase that a bit more. So in Australia, we did some research recently, and that 25% of our production comes from only 2 to 3% of all the agricultural land, and that's the urban agricultural areas. They're often far more productive than the broad-scale farming. So there's high potential there to really make a huge difference from the land that we've got, but we need to protect it, which is my point, because it's prime land for development, it's been tagged for so many other things and not really being valued as future agricultural land. Some things that are being developed in some countries that I think are interesting models to look at, a bit different scale from what you have here, but in California there is an amazing suburban development where all the cars are kept on the outside and the houses are condensed more, and all of the public space, all of the bikeways are in the middle, are all lined with edible species. Community gardens wrap themselves around the edge of these avenues. So as you walk through the landscape, you can be constantly plucking food from this space. There's several hundred people living there, 600-700 people living in this community, which is completely edible landscape. On the streets, the street trees are almonds, and every year they harvest the almonds, 7 tons of almonds, and they keep some for the community and they sell the rest, and the money they get from that they actually use to manage their vineyard and manage all the other things that they have in part. And this is in the middle of, you know, a city of California in Davis. Interesting model, thinking about how you can actually weave food direct, not just sticking it out on the outside or kind of thinking, okay, well that's a rural thing or a peri-urban thing, or just having a token garden somewhere. It's actually a real food producing area. Another type of farm concept as part of a development that I really like is what they're doing in Denmark. And when they're developing up a new area, they identify the best agricultural land and then protect that. Say, that will stay as agricultural land. And they build around that. And all the wastewater and nutrients flow down into that farm. The farmer is employed from the local neighbourhood, someone who has good experience in farming. And you as a resident from this development can come down and help them and learn from them. There's also allotments available. But every week you get a weekly box of food straight from the farm to your back door. So each development has its own farm which produces enough food to feed the people living there. So it's a very simple concept, but it makes so much sense. In my area where I live, we're experiencing the fastest growth ever Australia has seen in history of houses, one after the other, suburban development just eating up the land. I'm working as hard as I can to try and present this idea too. Perhaps making a little bit of headway, but still it's this concept that, oh well, food comes from out there. We really do need to take it on board. If we have the opportunity to be a designer, to be a policy maker, to have an input, or as a consumer saying, when you're going to a new place, well, where's your food garden, or where's your food come from? Keep asking the questions, keep putting that concept out there as something that will make a difference. One of the ways to actually preserve farmland is through this concept of farmland trusts. It's actually putting the land into, that it will be maintained as farmland in perpetuity. So it's owned by the community as a sustainable farm, and maybe that community organisation can lease it to different farmers. In America there was this amazing 14-acre farm right in the centre of Los Angeles. You can just see the downtown section up on the corner. And it was there for over a decade, and then we didn't have any protection. People just assumed they'd be okay. And one day the landowner decided that they were going to bulldoze it, and despite massive protests and even Los Angeles celebrities coming and sitting in trees for 3 or 4 days, they weren't able to protect it. I don't know if you heard of Daryl Hannah, movie star from there. She sat in a tree for 3 or 4 days, and yeah, she wasn't able to save it. But yet, but not far down the road, there was another farm in Goleta, where they'd actually also had pressures to redevelop the land, and they managed to form a land trust, and they've protected them. They're still there 20 years later. So this is a possibility to actually think, okay, thinking from a planning perspective, where is the best agricultural land in and around all of our neighbourhoods that are starting to spread out? How can we buy up that land as a partnership, perhaps between governments and NGOs and community-based organisations, to keep land in perpetuity? A simple idea that's coming quite a lot through places like the UK is this idea of land sharing. So those people with land and who maybe can't produce, they can't use all that land, will loan their land to someone else. And there's a new breed of people coming through in London called city farmers. And what they do is they have arrangements with maybe 20, 30 landowners, and they go and farm all of their backyards. They leave a box of food on their doorstep for their owner, and then gather the rest and take it to the market. So where there's only lots of small pockets of land, they're still able to gather enough to create an actual city farm. Thinking about how to create outlets, as this is from Cuba, where you may have heard that they went through a so-called special period where they had no fuel, and they had to resort to actually growing all their food in and around the city. And so they grew the food in parks and allotments and wherever they could, and they had to sell it from wherever they were growing it to. So every corner. So you lived in one neighbourhood, you had a farm in your park, and the farm shop was on the corner. And I was thinking, that's great from a special period, but it could also relate to something that we have in our own communities. That down the corner there's a community farm with a community shop on the corner, selling directly the food from there. No transport miles involved whatsoever. Also here in Hong Kong, you're starting to see the renaissance of farmers markets, organic farmers markets. Around the world, these are taking off. Central city streets have been closed to actually find spaces for farmers to bring their food directly in to consumers. Some of the things that people are saying about farmers markets is they like the opportunity to really meet up with other people, to meet face-to-face with farmers, and to get to know the person who's growing the food. I've spoken to lots of farmers who bring their food directly to these places, and they say it makes their hearts sing when people come to them and say, that food is absolutely amazing. They felt really sad before when they had to put the food on the truck and send it away. It's almost like they're taking good care of all these babies and they put them on the truck and there's no feedback. And it's this sort of this loss of heart and loss of soul. Whereas when they actually take their food directly in and meet the consumers and get that love back, I suppose, it's a revaluing. But also from an economic sense, the farmers are getting far greater price for their product, taking it directly to these markets, and at the same time the consumers are getting a better price, they're paying a better price. So it works, it's a win-win situation. So from a planning and design perspective, I think it's really important to consider where these markets might be placed in and around the city. It's sometimes very hard to find places to set these up that have the right access, that you can get the right permissions to do these types of things. In London, I know they're actually setting up covered areas so that they're all-weather markets, that mean that there's no problem at all any time throughout the year for these to continue. So it made me think, as we develop our cities and our towns and our village areas, thinking about how from the outset we can think, okay, we need some food gardens or allotments here and an outlet spot, so thinking through all the stages along the way. And not forgetting too, keeping the links with the rural and the peri-urban areas. How can we make relationships with orchardists out there? So supporting local orchards, getting direct produce from them. We have in our area a cow co-op. We have a cluster of cows in our community, and so they get milked by a different person every day. And so they have 7 people, so once a week you get to milk your cow. And so my neighbour milks it on Sundays, and I get a call in the morning. I take my jars over and he fills them up for me, and I take it home. And so it's fresh, raw, unprocessed milk. And so this way of having that direct relationship with a farmer somewhere close by, you can set up these types of systems. We do the same for honey, we do the same for eggs. I feel really sad about your situation with the chickens. These chickens are so beautiful and so fantastic. I feel really sad. I actually have a picture later on about, you know, having urban chooks, and I realise that that's just absolutely not possible. A lot of small farmers can actually survive in and around the edge of cities if they have a direct support of urban consumers, and that's really the only way that those farmers can survive well, small, sustainable polycultural farms. And then you get the value-added enterprises of the bread makers and the yogurt makers and the cheese makers and all the other preserves and things, so supporting the range. Another way of supporting local farms in and around the area of the food box systems, which you're very familiar with here. I understand you have CSAs and box home delivery systems. This is probably one of the easiest ways that you can directly support farms and access local food, reduce your food miles. The CSA model that I'm familiar with, I think you call it slightly differently here, is where you actually have a subscription. So it's like subscribing to a magazine or an internet provider or a mobile phone provider. You actually pay up front for your box of veggies for the next month or 6 months. Some actually do it for 12 months. This way it gives farmers a guaranteed income, and it means a direct relationship between the urban and the rural people. Finding ways to actually keep space for small locally owned shops too, or food cooperatives, I think is very important. I'm not sure again exactly what happens in Hong Kong, but I see every new development in Australia, when they open up, the shop has the same set of shops. You get your Starbucks, your 7-Eleven shop, what is it, Gloria. We have all, you know, the standing franchises. You know, where are the independent stores owned by the family? Finding ways to actually encourage and support that in the design and planning process, I think, is critical. In my town, not far from where I live, Malani, it was a dying rural town. It was a dairy farm area, people had all left. A lot of people started to move back to the land movement and realised they actually had no good food available to them, so they started up a food cooperative. And so these are the sorts of things too that can help to revitalise village communities and village agricultural systems. So we need to think from an economic perspective as well, not just the planning and design, how to create right livelihoods and support that economic development. So coming to community gardens, which seems to be an enormous passion of mine over the years, is really looking at community gardens. They're food producing areas, of course, but I think essentially they're about growing people, growing sustainable communities. They're about nourishing a change of attitude, a change of heart and a change of direction. So for me, they're very important sustainability hubs, education hubs, places where people can find out about a different way of living in the city and to connect with many of the different food systems. So when you come to a community garden, you get to link in with maybe a food box system or a cow co-op or all the different things that are happening. It's a hub